Unhealthy men are giving themselves healthy testosterone levels and are expecting that testosterone level alone to make them healthy. No, it's not. You give that 80-year-old the level that you gave the 21-year-old to resolve his symptoms, he's going to be jacked through the roof. He's not going to tolerate it. What is super physiological for you and what is super physiological for me? What is super physiological for a 70-year-old obese alcoholic who's type 2 diabetic? And what's physiological or super physiological for a 21-year-old giga chad who's in perfect health and he's biohacked every aspect of his life?
You know, with IGF-1, how when we're younger, it's higher, but then at the end of our life, even in the healthy people, it tends to get lower, and that could possibly be beneficial, meaning it doesn't proliferate the growth of other cells. But then I'm thinking, wait, does it just stop at IGF-1? Is there maybe a benefit to having lower testosterone as we age? Is that possible, bro?
Yeah, I've looked a lot at this, both in terms of, I guess, just thinking about it, but also in practice. And I kind of have a bit of a disagreement with some approaches in the space, particularly around like DHEA, for example, that we want to take, DHEA to youthful levels for an older man. Why? Why do we want to do that? I would argue that we don't want it to be deficient, absolutely. But should a 90-year-old man have the same hormone levels as a healthy 21-year-old man? No, that doesn't make any biological sense. The caveat to that, though, the middle ground that I fall into is that the average 20-year-old has the healthy levels of a 90-year-old man. So if you take a 90-year-old man and go, hey, we're going to give you the testosterone level of a healthy 21-year-old these days, it's probably about right for the 90-year-old, because the average 21-year-old is massively deficient in his hormones. But what you find in practice when you do this, and this is why it's so important that there are people out there who actually specialize in working with younger men, not just older men, is that if you take a guy who's 21 years old and he's healthy and he's doing everything right, that guy is going to need a much higher free testosterone to feel his best than an 80-year-old on TRT. It makes sense. Conversely, if you give that 80-year-old the level that you gave the 21-year-old to resolve his symptoms, he's going to be jacked through the roof. He's not going to tolerate it. So I think that there does need to be a gradient that's adjusted to age in terms of where we optimize testosterone to. Because one word that gets thrown a lot around the space a lot, and it gets parroted in a way that loses all meaning, is supraphysiological. What is supraphysiological for you and what is supraphysiological for me? What is supraphysiological for a 70-year-old obese alcoholic who's type 2 diabetic? And what's physiological or supraphysiological for a 21-year-old giga chad who's in perfect health and he's biohacked every aspect of his life? They're all going to be very different numbers. It's not just one number that we draw in the sand and go, anything above that is not physiological. So I think that, when it comes to TRT, one thing that I strongly believe in is that being hypergonadal is not only a horrible experience subjectively, but biologically, it massively increases your disposition to developing the diseases of aging. That's why we see in menopause, the risk of heart disease, cancer, diabetes, and dementia go through the roof when the hormones plummet. And we see the same thing in men. When guys have high stress and they've got poor health and they've got poor hormone levels, we see that the risk of these diseases and the outcomes of these diseases get worse. And we can mechanistically look and go, yep, this is part of the puzzle. The part that falls short, though, is that we upgrade the hormone levels, but we completely neglect all the other aspects of health that goes with it. And this is the part that I think can be risky, and this is the stuff that I think can cause problems. If you give an 80-year-old who's unhealthy the levels of a healthy 21-year-old, that's not cardioprotective. That's going to put stress on his heart. If you take an 80-year-old who's, had buildup of plaque in his arteries, he's insulin resistant, he's got high blood pressure, he's an alcoholic, doesn't exercise, and you go, oh, let's optimize your free testosterone level to double the top of the reference range, that's not going to be healthy. That has no business being that. But does that mean that that level is inherently bad? It's like saying a Lamborghini engine is bad if you put it in the wrong car. It's not a bad engine, it's just the wrong setting for it. So I think that optimizing testosterone levels is even if there are drawbacks, TRT is not perfect. And that's why when guys want to go on TRT when they don't need it, I'm like, look, this is a medical intervention for people who are sick. This is a imperfect way of fixing a pathway that's broken. This is not like a cheat code just to get testosterone levels of a footy player or some athlete that you haven't earned yourself. So I think optimizing testosterone levels are important, but I also think it's about what level do we optimize it to. And I think more is not better, but I also think we have to have a look at the individual. And I think age and baseline state of health is really important for determining, well, how much testosterone should you actually take? And that's why it's so individualized. And that's why it's so important that guys get proper help with this. They don't just go on YouTube and do it themselves.
If you've just started TRT, it is completely normal to feel overwhelmed and confused. There's a lot of new territory to cover, and there is a lot of conflicting information. I wrote TRT 101 so that you can have everything that you need to know in an instruction manual in one place that you can refer back to, that you can have all the questions answered before they even come up. TRT 101 is my best practice approach for TRT from start to finish, and it contains everything that you need to avoid all the challenges and pitfalls that I've seen come up in my clients over the last 5 years. You can check it out via the link below.
I like that you said TRT is an imperfect way of doing this, suggesting that, guys, and correct me if I'm wrong, guys, if you can recover or restore your testosterone naturally, please do so, because we have an expert here saying this is an imperfect way of doing things. That's something I'm wrestling with, because I'll be honest with you, when I started this fertility protocol that you recommended to me, I started with just HCG and FSH. I came off testosterone. Realistically, I felt fine. And I've done it before, and I'm quite confident I could recover levels. I'm just lazy or fearful that there might be a period where my levels are low or suboptimal. And I guess the concern is that, like you said, it's imperfect. How do I know, even if I'm living the perfect life? No one does, but let's presume for this experiment I do. Is there a benefit to having a lower level? I mean, we just won't ever really know, will we? And so I guess I've looked into what research we have available, and the dose I'm taking, it's not really reflected in these papers. The doses reflected in these papers, I would consider them too low. Now, you know, a lot of these testosterone levels are much lower than where my testosterone level is now. And for context, my free testosterone in p-moles, it's 800 plus, depending on where I'm drawing the labs. Whereas in the papers, we convert that to United States units, it's lower. And I'm thinking a lot of these papers might not be relevant for me with the dose I'm taking. I'm taking 150 milligrams per week. A lot of these doses are more in the 100 milligrams per week, sometimes even less. And also, truthfully, I have to be honest, I've taken 100 milligrams per week and I feel fine. It's just I'm less muscular. You know, so I'm taking 150 milligrams. I don't necessarily feel worse at 150, but I'm more muscular than I would at 100. I just am. And so I might be lightly juicing my way to an earlier death. I don't know, bro. Is that possible?
I don't think at those levels, because I see, like, one thing that I see all the time is like, and you know, I'm very blessed that guys come to me in this situation. I get guys come to me who don't need TRT. They're like, hey, my testosterone levels are awesome and I want to maintain this and, you know, stay on top of this. So I don't get a lot of these guys, but I've had enough of them over the years to see where these natural testosterone levels sit. And I've seen that level naturally a heap. I've seen much higher levels than that naturally a heap. And those guys are doing really, really well. I also think that, and I've spoken to a bunch of my colleagues about this who all agree, is that if you were hypothetically going to make a free testosterone of 800 or take TRT to get a free testosterone of 800, I don't think the TRT one works as well as the natural one. And I think that there's a bunch of factors for that. It's not being manufactured locally in the cell. I think that's probably the biggest factor as well. There's different aspects of receptor binding. It's going through the liver to be cleaved and it's getting distributed in a different way. But what we see is that we often have to take the levels on paper a little bit higher when we use exogenous testosterone to get the same symptom resolution as guys have naturally. And we also see that when we look at observational studies, but there's a really important caveat to this, which is what a whole bunch of my practice is based off. When we look at observational studies, guys with those levels that you're talking about who have those levels naturally have better health outcomes than guys who have lower testosterone levels. So I think that number that you're looking at, that, you know, free testosterone of 800 to 1200, which is basically, you know, top quartile of the reference range to, you know, just over, you know, a quartile above the reference range. for me, when I look at levels like that, I think that that is objectively healthier. I think there's levels that go beyond that people could argue depending on receptor resistance and individual variability. Is it healthier to go above that to a point? Maybe. I think that there's some contention there. But the most important thing, and this is where guys get this stuff completely wrong, because they hear that and they go, cool, done. There's a big caveat there. If we are looking at observational data on guys who aren't on TRT, they had to earn those testosterone levels themselves. They had to acquire those naturally. That is not an easy level to have naturally. Even if you have good genetics, you have to be doing everything right to actually earn those testosterone levels. So this is something that we call in science a healthy user bias. So if you're on TRT and you go, oh, well, in this observational study of a whole bunch of natural guys, they had a free testosterone level the same as where I'm taking mine to, therefore it's healthy because it's observed in those guys. You didn't have to do all the other stuff that's health promoting to get that level. So if you don't do that, then it actually may not be healthy for you. And this is one of the most important things I try to teach my guys in terms of reducing the acute side effects from TRT, but also just feeling better and having that sweet spot balance between performance and longevity. You have to take a step back and go, okay, if I'm going to take my testosterone levels up to X, it means that if I could, I would be making these levels naturally. And the disconnect between that is, in my experience, what causes the vast majority of side effects. Unhealthy men are giving themselves healthy testosterone levels and are expecting that testosterone level alone to make them healthy. It's like taking a Suzuki Swift that needs a service, putting a Lamborghini engine in it and going, this is going to make my car a Lamborghini. No, it's not. And the other thing as well is you just think because you buy a Lamborghini that now you're going to know how to drive it. That thing goes faster, but it's difficult to control around the corners. Same with higher testosterone as well. If you're going to put your body into an optimal testosterone environment, you need to actually make sure that the receptor expression internally is going to match that signal that you're putting in. So if you're living like someone who would be completely if your body would be completely suppressing your testosterone production and it's pumping the brakes, and you're coming in and going, I can solve this, more accelerator, you're not going to have a smooth ride forward. You're now working against your body. You're not working with the body. And I think that the overall habits in terms of how someone lives is really important in determining whether the testosterone they're taking is actually going to be health promoting or potentially health damaging for them.
Makes sense. I guess my next question on that would be, for these couch potatoes that we throw in optimal testosterone, what sort of symptoms do they see that they aren't able to tolerate? Has it got to do with hematocrit, or is it something psychological? What tends to happen to these guys that you see?
Well, we know that increased systemic inflammation increases aromatase production. So one thing that I see is that they get the symptoms associated with excess estrogen. Even doing 2 to 3 injections a week of a conservative dose, they get the negative estrogen symptoms. And a lot of the time they don't even correlate with the serum estradiol level. And it's because they're putting a bunch of testosterone into a body that would never be able to make it because aromatase production is upregulated because estrogen's anti-inflammatory. So the body is trying to put fire out, and you're putting in a whole bunch of gasoline, and the smoke alarm's going off, and you're going, I'm going to turn the smoke alarm off by taking an aromatase inhibitor. You fix one problem, then you get sore joints and you get mood issues and all these kind of stuff. So I see estrogenic symptoms as one of the, and it's not the only thing that causes these symptoms, but it's definitely a big factor. The other one is acne as well. Guys will get terrible acne, and a lot of the time guys get acne because they sweat into polyester clothes, or they're using dirty underground steroids, which are impure, and they're injecting themselves with crap. But even when we get the protocol perfectly dialed in, we see acne, we see estrogenic side effects, increased water retention, increased blood pressure, and increased blood viscosity. And that there's the problem with all this stuff is there's nuance. And people like to, and this is going back to what we were talking about in terms of a formalized training in science, is that people actually need to learn to interpret scientific literature. And there's this consensus at the moment in people who like to talk about science who aren't scientists. And I don't mean to sound elitist in that, but I'm not a mechanic, so I'm not going to pop the bonnet in my car and fuck around with what's under the hood and think I'm an expert on it. I can still watch car videos. I can still drive a car, though. I can still appreciate it, but I wouldn't tell other people what to do. And when it comes to science, there are always outliers, there are always exceptions to the rules, but they don't disprove rules. So it's important that guys understand that, just because they don't fall into that category, that they're 1 in 100, doesn't mean the rules are wrong. It just means that there can be outliers in determining, rules for the masses. So when it comes to increased blood viscosity on testosterone, it's important to note that part of the therapeutic benefit of TRT, and my friend Dr. Keith Nichols has covered this prolifically, he explains this much more eloquently than me. When we go on TRT, the increased red blood cell production is therapeutic. That's part of getting more oxygen to the cells in the body. It takes ferritin down. The body is actually operating at a higher capacity and producing red blood cells. That's not a bad thing. But if the foundation for that is already polycythemia, which is like a disease state from poor metabolic function, sleep apnea, chronic stress, there's all these factors that cause this, that therapeutic increase in red blood cell count, if that's already on top of a high hematocrit to begin with because of a disease state, this is an example of a disconnect between the testosterone levels going in and the testosterone levels that should be there. And sometimes this will take someone's hematocrit into a level that, can be in the high 50s that will induce, a risk of a whole bunch of problems that typically shows up as either a red face or extremely high blood pressure. And then they say, oh, well, the solution for this is to go and donate blood. It's a Band-Aid. The solution for that is being like, well, what's causing the underlying pathological increase in these red blood cell counts? And a lot of the time when you sit down with these guys and they've got this red blood cell problem, or they've got this estrogenic problem, or they've got this problem with acne, or this problem with insomnia, or this problem with excessive sweating, we can just take a step back. And I often ask them the question, what are you doing that you know you shouldn't be doing? Or what are you not doing that you know you should be doing? And I say, now that you're on TRT, you're not getting away with that. And almost always it's excessive alcohol consumption. And a lot of the time guys are like, oh, I don't drink that much. I just have 10 or 15 drinks on a Friday. No, you can't do that. Lack of exercise, eating too much junk food, being more than 20 to 25% body fat. Guys don't realize how lean they need to be to actually be healthy. If you're greater than 20% body fat, you wouldn't have TRT levels to begin with. Of course, you're going to get side effects. So sometimes it can be a difficult pill to swallow. I say it's a big fat suppository going up there because it's uncomfortable, is realizing just how much of a good state of health you need to be in to tolerate and get the benefits of optimal testosterone production. And a lot of the time guys are like, oh, I don't want to do that, but they want to feel good. They want to feel like they want to have the clear energy, no brain fog, good sleep, good sexual function. They want all of those things, but they don't want to actually be the guy who would have those things and earn them. And that's one of the biggest issues that I see on TRT is guys are just not taking care of themselves as well as they need to.
If someone is doing a physiological hormone replacement therapy with testosterone, we are mimicking the correct amount of testosterone that should be in the body. This should not require or necessitate aromatase inhibition. There's no such thing as a genetic over-aromatizer. You're just fat or you're drinking too much alcohol. This is just the way it is. Increasing injection frequency is the turn it off and turn it back on TRT. It doesn't solve every problem, but it's a really easy place to start.